Hey there. Thanks again for listening to the Thatcher Report. I always appreciate all of my listeners out there. So, I'm recording this on Thursday, November 6th. I wrote it. I'm recording an essay that I wrote on my Substack, which is Thatcher Report. I wrote it on Wednesday morning to recap the big Tuesday elections, which have gotten a huge amount of media attention. They were only in 4 states, 4 blue states, but they're big. They're big. It turns out that it's only New Jersey and Virginia which have off year gubernatorial elections. So that means there's somebody, we voted for president in 2024. He or she comes into office in January 2025. And then in November 2025, there are 2 gubernatorial races, and they're seen as early indicators for the midterms, which of course are going to be November 2026. The outcome is obvious that Trump was on the ballot if you are a Democratic voter or an independent voter who decided to vote for the Democrats. He wasn't technically on the ballot. He'll never be on the ballot again. But this is the No Kings impact. This is the rallying cry. It's anything but Trump. And that completely sank 2 gubernatorial candidates in blue states. But, they've had Republicans before. And obviously, California galvanized them for Prop 50 to have gerrymandering, partisan Democratic gerrymandering. And of course, the giant election in New York for mayor, which was, always going to be a Democrat. It's very rare to vote for a Republican. It's happened in Giuliani and Bloomberg, but those are really, really exceptional candidates. And anyways, it was a big night because on Tuesday, because the polling, which is the worst thing to ever pay attention to, the polling was wrong about the margins for the Democrats, which, they had huge wins in New Jersey and in Virginia. New York was much, much closer. I held a little pizza party last night, and it turned into like a group therapy session for everybody at the table who are mostly liberal Jews, I would say. There was one person there who's not Jewish, but she's affiliated very closely with the Jewish people. And there was a gay guy there at the table. Not that that should implicate his politics, but it's sort of a shorthand of saying that we had different people, kind of classically on the left, me included, as our origin story, and we were all, bereft about the Mamdani election. How huge was his win? Well, a lot of voters turned out. The massive turnout got him slightly over 50% in essentially a 2-man race. Now, there was Curtis Sliwa, who was a spoiler, who got like 7 or 8%. It's just such a shanda, such an embarrassment and shame that he ran at all. Cuomo still did really well. I think Cuomo got like more votes for mayor than like anybody in many, many years and decades in New York politics. But of course, Mamdani got slightly more. Makes you really think if there had been a mainstream moderate Republican who's not a nutcase running and Cuomo wasn't running, what would have happened? But, coulda, woulda, shoulda. So what I want to talk about is from my essay is about the good news about Tuesday. So it's no surprise to my listeners that I started as a true blue Democrat. I've always voted Democrats pretty much my entire life. As an adult, my first presidential election was 1992 for Bill Clinton. I had a really good winning streak until George Bush was selected by the Supreme Court to be president, and despite losing the popular vote. But, after October 7th, after changes over the past many years in the Democratic Party, after being kind of radicalized by the mainstream media, which I think is really anti-Jewish, and sort of very woke and very rigid ideologically, which they didn't used to be, and that's just the trend in some of the major newsrooms. I have shifted, and now I consider myself, a proud independent, but I'm more likely to caucus with the Republicans. I just think they have better ideas in my world of an all blue state with very few with essentially no political choices. I've always lived in blue monopolies. So I like the idea of supporting Republicans because it creates pressure on everybody to compete for my vote and for my neighbors' votes. So but what I want to talk about is what I think are good news. So that's obvious. It's easy why the bad news, of course, is that if you believe in democracy, which the left tells us they're very dedicated to democracy, then why on earth are they passing gerrymandering in California? Now they'll say, oh, well, we have to compete with Texas, which is already a very, very red state. But with their red states have long been doing gerrymandering. I don't support that at all. But here you go. Now the big, powerful blue states are doing it, and they're talking about it in New York too. And that's a devolution of democracy. But for some reason, that criticism is muted from the left. They don't have any sense of introspection when they're doing it themselves. Same thing with racism and anti-Semitism. They don't like it when Tucker Carlson hosts a Nick Fuentes, which I'm very critical of that. It's horrible. On the right, there's a lot of criticism of that. On the left, when they do it themselves, there is no criticism of it. There's no awareness of it. It's kind of a strange omission. So same thing for California. Obviously, I'm worried about Mamdani. There's a lot of debate of how to characterize his anti-Israel activism, but the shorthand is anti-Semitism. It's a longer conversation. Anti-Semitism is kind of an outdated term. It's a pre-Israel term for when Jews didn't have sovereignty in the Middle East or anywhere, and they were really a victim class in Europe. Anti-Semitism is a German term because we're technically Semitic, which obviously Arabs are too. So the term is a holdover. It's about as effective as saying transphobe or transphobe. I don't know if there's an O in there or not, or Islamophobe. They're kind of just made up terms that I don't know how durable they're going to be. But in any event, Mamdani certainly has built his political career, and it seems like his identity based on his wife, that opposing Jewish sovereignty in the Middle East, which is about 9 million people, is his organizing principle, and everything kind of flows from there. So that's a problem, and you just got to wonder what that portends for other groups. So if his entire political identity is about fighting colonialism in the Middle East, which has definitely happened from Arab Muslims colonized the Middle East in the year like 800 and onwards. The Middle East didn't used to be Muslim until Islam was originated in Arabia, now called Saudi Arabia, and then spread. But that was a long time ago. It doesn't really deserve much comment. But in any event, if he is intent on attacking Israel supporters who are Jewish, obviously, then who else is he going to attack? The billionaire class. Okay, there are all these boogeymen. Now, when you start going after boogeymen, who's next, right? There's going to be another one. Is it the patriarchy, or is it left-handed people, or who? When your politics are a politics of difference, division, and hate, which is a fair criticism to a certain degree for the Republicans at times, then it's a slippery slope, or not so slippery. It just is a steep drop into violence and attacks. However, there was really good news, and I'm going to keep this episode kind of tight. There are two good pieces of news. One of them is what I've been talking about almost since I inaugurated this podcast, is that the issue is affordability. This is the issue. Mamdani is not a dumb guy. He reads the tea leaves for his base, which is, again, he got a lot of votes, but there are a lot of votes cast against him. So it's literally 50-50. He got like 50.5%. So this is the same thing for Trump. They get a little bit of a majority, so they win in a democracy. Is that a mandate? I don't know. They get power, so they're going to say it's a mandate, but the electorate, even in New York City, is pretty divided. Nevertheless, affordability. I don't live in New Jersey or Virginia. I didn't follow those races so closely. But from what I understand, in New Jersey, which has a gigantic affordability problem, just like Massachusetts, just like New York, just like California, like a lot of blue states, that's what that governor-elect, focused on. So that's good. That's good stuff. And the goal, I think, of an American citizen is not to support a party. I don't even know that we should have parties. Obviously, that's not going to happen. That's an idealistic statement. But I don't care about the parties. I care about my life and my family and my friends and my neighbors and my community and my ethnic group and blah, 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 my region, my job. Those are the things that people should care about. I couldn't care less what the name of the party is, as long as I'm being taken care of. And, there's a value system that I think is good. Voters recognized that this is something that you're not going to read about in the mainstream media. You're certainly not going to hear about it from the ruling party, which are now the Republicans, because they never want to, the ruling party is always loath to take responsibility for bad things. That's kind of a human response. But we're in a recession and we need help. Certain sectors of the economy are more recessed than others, but it's bad. It's bad out there. Now, I hope it changes. I'm always rooting for America. I don't want things to be bad, but it's bad, and it's gotten really bad. And what I think is happening is that we've had a lopsided economy for a long time, right? Bernie Sanders didn't become famous yesterday. He became famous over 10 years ago because he's been talking about this. Others have been talking about this too, that we have a lopsided economy. It's basically favored finance and tech elites, right? I'm in the tech world. I don't think I'm an elite, but I'm talking like the Google and Elon Musk's and those kind of people. And obviously the finance industry, which in New York City is not just banks, it's also the law firms that support them and so on. They are taking all of the wins, right? And the rest of us are screwed. This is the 99% Occupy Wall Street argument. I think it's still very relevant. I don't think the people who are in that movement have any good ideas, but their critique is really good. And so it's a lopsided economy. Blue states' answer is always to raise taxes while refusing to build housing. So that makes things pretty expensive and bad. And now add AI, right? AI is coming for the white collar classes, me, the middle classes, or the vaguely upper middle class, whatever sector of that economy you want to say, the professional classes. That's pretty bad. So the working classes have been screwed for a really long time. The lower middle classes have been screwed. Now the more vaguely kind of upperish middle classes are getting screwed. These people are voting. What they're saying is make America affordable. That should be nonpartisan. And those voices, I believe, are what that I'm paying attention to. Obviously, there's rabid anti-Trumpism, Trump derangement syndrome. There's, on the Republican side, there would be like rabid anti-Bidenism. That's not that interesting to me. That's kind of the sports team politics that I think a lot of the mainstream press gets looped into. This is like the covering elections like a horse race. This is a really old criticism of the press going back from when I went to grad school in the 90s. But in any event, that's not that interesting. What's interesting to me is the desire for affordability. So I think that's really good news. That's the message. Now, why is that particularly good news? Because it sends a message to the White House, to the ruling party. This is Mike Johnson. This is Donald Trump. These are all their acolytes and their media support. That's more, sort of not mainstream media, but in the podcast or new media world. It really sends a message, and especially because the margins were so high in New Jersey and Virginia, that people are not happy with the economy. It's the economy, stupid. James Carville said it in 1992. I don't know that I agree with every single thing he says, but I think he's one of these other mavens which is Yiddish for like a master, an expert who can read the tea leaves. This is the focus of who should be in charge. I wrote about this, 6 months ago. Affordability, affordability, affordability. I don't care who it is. It could be a real estate celebrity with a gigantic ego who bends all the rules and has a penchant for sucking wealth out of others to give it to his family. It could be, a democratic victim of trans Islamophobia who somehow, like a superhero, rises against Jewish white male oppression and defeats the empire. Which is the story they tell themselves. I don't know that I care so much who it is, right? I just want to make things affordable. I want to live in a country that's improving. To me, as a believer in democracy, as somebody who's spent time in third world countries, you have to have a big, powerful middle class to have a really good democracy. I think that's a really key. You have to have a value system, a Western civilization tradition, all these other ingredients, but you got to have a powerful middle class. Okay, so that's where I think is the good news. It's about affordability, right? I want the Republicans to focus. The Republicans are the ones in charge, so they're the ones I'm talking about in this context. I want them to focus on the economy. Tax cuts are nice, sure, not a problem. Massive deficits are really bad. Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich balanced the budget in my lifetime. The economy was awesome after that. I don't care what they believed in. I just want to have a balanced budget because interest rates go down. Everything is great if you can do that. We did it for like a few years until George Bush blew it up, and I want that. I want that back. So I don't think Republicans are capable of doing that. They always have massive deficits. But hey, here's for them to try. MAGA is really different than George Bush. They should try something new. Lower interest rates are great. I took advantage of COVID interest rates to buy a property. That's been an amazing thing for me. The lack of housing supply is bad, right? Mamdani, for all of his insights, doesn't seem to be really focused on the supply side. He wants to make things cheaper for people who already have an apartment that's rent stabilized. But what about the other people? Are they all Jewish white male supremacists or something, and they don't deserve help? How about making it better for everybody? So, and then AI chatbots. I'm like you. We're all using AI now to a certain degree. I certainly use it for like my Google searches. It's great. It's much more efficient. But losing your job to one is really bad. So these are the things that I think people care about, right? They want a growing economy. They want to be able to buy a house. They want to have some kind of answer to the coming disruption of AI. The president, how much can the president do about this? It's funny. Whenever a Democrat comes into office, we read a lot of news stories about how little control the president has over the election. Now, when there's a Republican in the office, we don't read about that at all. We read about how he's destroying the economy or something. But the reality is the president's a very powerful position. We certainly have a very empowered president right now. Over the past many decades, regardless of party, the presidency, the executive has expanded power at the detriment to Congress, which has a lot of dysfunction. The point is that the president has a lot of power. I would argue, like a lot of people, too much power, and we should have more of a balanced approach. But nevertheless, he, as a man, can really direct his efforts legislatively, regulation, culturally, to improve the economy. So this is what I like about the Tuesday elections, even though I guess from a partisan perspective, the side that I'm kind of more interested in lost some power in states where they really didn't have power to begin with. This is like the gun at the beginning of the race. The Republican Party has 12 months to see if they can, to make the case to the public that they can boost the economy. They got 12 months. This is the indicator of the midterms. Great. That's good. I want political competition. Most Americans, you read all these news stories, and this is not the fault of the press. It's like, what are they going to cover, I guess? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is the fault. There's this whole idea that we have something called the economy, and you can measure it with a bunch of statistics, GDP, stock markets, emerging financial instruments like crypto. That's sort of a made up idea, right? I think it comes maybe from the 1940s, the New Deal, that you could like measure the economy. Really, what we have is it's much more complicated than that. It's much more individual and idiosyncratic. We all have very different experiences based on how much money our parents have, what we've been able to accrue in our lifetimes, and our careers, our education. There's all these different factors. So I believe that the majority of Americans, they don't care about crypto. They don't care about the NASDAQ or the Dow Jones. They don't really care about the GDP. Those are all false measures. What they really care about after, your physical safety, can you walk outside safely and come back home? I think that's the thing that most humans care about most. After that, I think they care about 5 things: affording a roof over their heads, food, health, a way to get around, and education. Those are the 5 aspects that I can determine that people care about. I'm sure I'm projecting maybe my own concerns and anxieties, but I think those are the things. You want to be able to have your housing. You want to have your physical safety, right? I don't think Democrats have a good track record of physical safety. I live in New York City with a lot of violence, and you read a lot of stories about statistics, but we still have a lot of violence. I don't care what the statistics are. I just don't want the violence. So you care about that. But then you got to afford a roof over your head. You got to have something that you can afford. It's not affordable. You have to be able to afford food that's good quality food, not junk pushed at us by mega corporations who have amazing margins and economies of scale. Sorry, they have amazing economies of scale. They can adjust their margin so you can get a lot of food for cheap, but it's not good for you. So we need good quality food. Obviously, we need healthcare. We live in a country with absolutely unaffordable health insurance. The Affordable Care Act by Obama is not affordable. It's the Unaffordable Care Act. You need transportation. You got to get around. I live in a city that's not as car dependent, but try taking an elevator if you have a physical disability. If you have a kid in a stroller, you can't take an escalator or an elevator rather at most train stations in New York City. That's the problem I see here. Obviously, it's the price of cars. Gas prices are down, but it should be easier to get around, more affordable. And then, of course, education. I think it's fifth, maybe, in my rankings, but you got to be able to have a good education for yourself, for your kids. We don't do that in this country. We have terrible public schools in the urban environments. They suck up a ton of resources financially. It's not like they're underfunded. Funding isn't the issue. We just have terrible education at the public level. Many of my friends who are, I guess, of a similar socioeconomic status of mine, a lot of them are higher, they go to private schools or they leave the urban environment to send their kids to much better suburban schools, which are almost the equivalent of private schools because they have very high property taxes in Massachusetts, in suburban New York, suburban New Jersey, California. You're paying for the public schools. It's essentially a private school network from a perspective of an urban person, where let's say you don't have those choices, you don't have that kind of money, or you want to stay in an urban environment for your family or for whatever your own preference is, you're really in trouble, right? Not a lot of people are talking about this on the left. There's some talk, charter schools, there's some different ideas. Anyways, those are the 5 things that I think people care about. I want my politicians to talk about those 5 things, or the 6 things, including safety. I don't care who they are. So that's why I think it's good news. The voters that I'm listening to that are not so partisan are saying, I got to afford things. I can't afford things. And I want that to shake up the White House. Now, if you want to, look at the reverse scenario to kind of prove my point, imagine if the Republicans had won really big. Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey, Earl Sears in Virginia, Mamdani got trounced by Cuomo or Sliwa, which is, impossible to imagine. What would my takeaway be? Obviously, it would be quite different, but there would be a lot of complacence and smugness in the White House and in Congress. I don't want that. I want them to be scared for their jobs. That's what your politicians should do. They should be smart. They should be ethical. They should be good at wielding power. But I want them to be a little bit nervous that they're going to lose power. So that's great. Now, the last point, and as I wrap, is another great thing is we hear from No Kings. We hear from a lot of people about fascism and authoritarianism, all these terrible, scary concepts like from World War II. It's really, really scary. I don't know. Maybe it resonates a little bit more if you're Jewish, but it's like really scary. Like in this era of, it's like popular and hip to be anti-Israel, and it's kind of like cool to wear a keffiyeh. And then you hear all these people talking about Hitler and fascism. It's just frankly scary. Maybe it's like, sort of irrational connecting dots. I don't know. All those all those behaviors are coming from the left, I observe. That's kind of scary talk. Actually, let's just look at what happened. So that's scary stuff. It's fascism. The world is ending. Well, we had massive turnout of voters in an odd year election, right? Off year meaning not during a presidential campaign when more people are paying attention is the theory. And then an odd year where you just don't tend to have other campaigns, right? There's only 4 states where doing things. All right, okay, sorry, a little bit of an interruption there. But this is like a weird year to measure voting. We had huge numbers. Americans turned out. Now, there are some thinking that maybe Republicans didn't turn out, and that explains some of the lopsided wins for Democrats. I have no idea. It doesn't really matter. The hair splitting, a lot of people showed up. That's really heartening if you love America. The whole point of our country is that we became independent of the British monarchy, which, gave us suzerainty here. And also, it required every American to take responsibility to choose our government. People did that on Tuesday. So I can make all of my cranky, sarcastic, angry, insecure comments about the Democratic Party and their hysteria about the end of democracy. I just going to note that we had really good citizenship on Tuesday. It's awesome. America did great. I'm really proud of people for voting in such great numbers. It really kind of refreshes my patriotism, and it refreshes my optimism in this country. You got to have people turn out to vote. It's a really big problem we struggle with. We didn't struggle with it on Tuesday. So, you know, that's great. Okay. The elephant in the room, of course, is, or whatever that idiom is Mamdani. So I have to kind of talk about him. The observation I want to make about Mamdani, there's a lot already being said about him. So I'm not going to go too far into like his policies and, how realistic are they or not. I think when people are very partisan, they kind of miss a lot of intellectual analysis. So on my side of the aisle, on this issue, everybody is kind of very condescending towards him. Oh, he can't afford any of his things. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I don't think it's so good just to be like, well, he's stupid and you can't fund. He wants to spend a lot of money. That's kind of his whole thing. He wants things to be free for his supporters. So that requires spending a lot more money than we already do at $116 billion a year in New York City. Just to be a little bit more dispassionate and analytic, he says he is going to do that by taxing people. And everybody is like, well, he's the mayor. He doesn't choose taxation policy. That comes from Albany. Well, Albany has a very woke left-wing legislature and currently a centrist Democratic governor who is under fire from the left flank. So there's going to be a gubernatorial, there's going to be a primary. We don't know who the next governor is going to be of the state of New York. If it becomes a very far left-wing person who the lieutenant governor is going to run against maybe Elise Stefanik, and if he wins and the legislature stays the way it is, which is like super deep blue, then maybe they will pass those tax laws to favor Mamdani at the detriment of the very, very tippy top of the upper classes who essentially pay for everything in New York City. Wealthy people pay for 40% of the New York City budget. It's not a lot of people, but not all of them are going to move to Miami, right? Some of them are going to stay here. In any event, I just don't think you should discount Mamdani's political efficacy immediately. I don't think that's intellectual or smart. So that's one thing to talk to my sort of people, right? Who are like, Mamdani, this is, he's such a fanciful figure. I don't know. He just won power. I think it's always important to pay attention to people who win power, no matter what you might think about them. But the criticism that I'm not seeing or the insight that I'm not reading anywhere or hearing anywhere is about luck. This is my point about Mamdani. It doesn't deter from his success, but I think you should just pay attention to it if you like thinking about politics. He did a really good job running. Obviously, he won. He was kind of winning the whole time in hindsight. But this is a weird election in New York City. We didn't have an incumbent, right? Eric Adams dropped out. He's historically unpopular. It's a problem for Black New Yorkers, right? We have now had two Black mayors. They both only did a single term. Dinkins, and then who then Giuliani succeeded, and now Eric Adams, and now Mamdani is succeeding him, which is like the funhouse mirror version of Giuliani, kind of like a pre-MAGA type of figure. In any event, Eric Adams wasn't running. Usually, the incumbent always wins in New York City, always. Bloomberg, de Blasio, it doesn't matter what the polling even is. The way the political machine works is they win. That didn't happen. That guy wasn't running. Now, who was running? Well, Cuomo is an independent. We've almost never had that. I've lived in New York since the late 90s. We've never had an independent candidate of this stature. But also Cuomo, I don't know, Shakespearean is kind of a compliment maybe, but he was this kind of like tragic political figure. It's just kind of, he wasn't the right guy to be running. He's way too polarizing. His track record, his COVID, his belligerence, his bellicosity, and his track record with women. It just wasn't the right person to run. And then, of course, so he was an independent. And then the Republicans really didn't field a candidate. Curtis Sliwa is kind of a stunt media figure for himself. He's like a stunt candidate. He's not a legitimate candidate. He got less than 10% of the vote. Nobody should pay attention to anybody who gets less than 10% of the vote. So this is a weird election, and it just barely favored Mamdani. Literally less than 51% of the vote, as far as I know. Maybe he'll get up to 51%. I mean, it's just like a sliver of his win. Of course, that's enough. That was, luck. And also the ballot was really skewed. I was texting a good friend about this the other day, who's a really keen advocate of democracy, big D democracy. He thinks a lot about elections, all the technical stuff. He's an expert in it. The ballot had Mamdani listed twice because he ran under two different parties, which is common in New York City, New York State. And then Cuomo was like further down, and there were all these names on the ballot of people who weren't running or who were polling poorly. Eric Adams was on the ballot. Why are these people on the ballot if they're not running? I don't believe that people can't print ballots at the last minute. We live in New York City. It's the media capital of the most powerful country on earth. You can print stuff at the last minute, stick it on a truck, and bring it to the polling station the same day. You can do that in a powerful, rich country. We have a $116 billion budget, I just told you. We can figure that out. Anyway, so there was a lot of luck for Mamdani. Now, this quickly gets you into coulda, woulda, shoulda. My only thing to note is that I'm not hearing about that, and I just think you should think about that as far as like, what does this portend for the Democratic Party? A centrist one in New Jersey, a more, from what I'm understanding, in Virginia, that Spanberger is pretty more to the far left, I guess, and then Mamdani is obviously kind of off the reservation. To use a term not favored by the land acknowledgement people. He's really, really, really extreme. But I just think you have to kind of temper a lot of the doomsday scenarios or a lot of the joy, depending on your politics, based on luck. But I will note that Mamdani obviously was very strong. He ran a brilliant campaign. He deserves the credit for his win. He's good at this. He's not going to not be good at this, I think, over his lifetime. He's a smart guy. He focused on affordability. So that's kind of the similar message. His manifestation of the policies, et cetera, are really different, but he focused on it. So I go into more about the identity politics of this. I'll just note that the other thing that was sort of lucky for Mamdani is he has the right identity politics for mainstream media. So everybody, all the news you read about it, oh, he's young, he's really good at social media. Newsflash, every politician from now onwards, or from 10 years ago onwards, has to be good at social media. Trump is a 78-year-old white guy. He's really good at social media, right? He was like the Twitter candidate back in 2015. So now it's literally 10 years later, we have a younger, different colored skin looking person. It's the same thing. It's AOC. It was really good at social media. They're all going to be good at social media. That's not really an interesting observation anymore. What I think is more interesting to think about is his ability to have mainstream media support. Now, I know I get in trouble for some of this, but I have a lot of problems with the mainstream media because I think that they're very partisan. I think they're pretty much solely focused on the left. I think they've kind of become anti-intellectual, and they're not really interested in like more dispassionate analysis. It's more of just like, my team is better than your team. So in any event, this, I think, very biased mainstream media, they're focused on identity politics. This hasn't changed in 20, 30 years. It's only gotten more intense with trans and stuff like that. They've doubled down on this kind of brand of, or this, in Hebrew you call it hashkafa, like this kind of perspective, this worldview. So in any event, this is kind of long-winded, but you have to have the correct or incorrect identity in order to be anointed in the newsrooms. So a darker-skinned Muslim immigrant who can campaign in Urdu, Arabic, and Spanish, boom, you just won the liberal jackpot. I mean, you're Muslim. That's the one religion you're allowed to be. It's bad to be Christian or Jewish, but you can certainly be, it's preferred to be atheist, but you can certainly be Muslim. That's awesome. Obviously, skin color is huge. The more melanin, the better it is among the sort of liberal media world. And then, foreign languages, being an immigrant. Woo, this is awesome. It's a shame he's not disabled and trans. That's just something to really worry about, I guess. But he did it. Okay, for very keen political observers, wait a second. What about in Virginia? We're told the first woman governor ever of Virginia was just elected. Well, it was two women running against each other. So, I mean, yeah, there's the first woman governor, but it would have been whoever won. The gubernatorial candidate in Virginia is Black, right? A woman, Black, military background. So doesn't that complicate my critique of mainstream media's focus on identity? Well, no, because there's one thing, it turns out, more important than skin color. Only one. Skin color is paramount, right? And right after that is gender. But partisanship, your party, is the most important thing. So if you're a Black Republican, boom, you're out of it. You don't get the support. So in any event, Mamdani got kind of lucky, because I think mainstream media for this era, really, really, really likes some racial groups over other groups. And this is a combination then of social media dominance and mainstream media dominance. And, you read all this stuff. Oh, he's so young. He galvanized Gen Z. I'm sure that's all true. I live in Brooklyn. I saw people stickering and flyers and stuff like that. I saw a lot of gray-haired people excited about Mamdani. I pay more attention to the Jewish community. I saw a lot of older, classically liberal, old school, like bagels and lox kind of Jews, not really like people going to a mainstream normative synagogue. These are just kind of more of the assimilated, very liberal values are kind of their religion, tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. Anyways, I saw a lot of gray-haired people. Is that scientific analysis? No, it's not. It's just vibes and anecdotes. But I think that you add social media dominance, which is a table stakes for politics. You have that. You add mainstream media, boom, you're going to win, right? So he enjoyed a lot of different factors, which all came together and squeezed out a win for him. So anyways, thank you for listening. Just to end on a positive note, a lot of voters showed up. That's so awesome. That's great. That's democracy working. Don't believe all this stuff about democracy ending. We always should be wary, and we should always be supportive and vigilant of our democracy. But okay, I saw a really good I saw democracy in action. That's awesome. And now we're sent to really the American voters. I didn't vote on this, but the American sentiment is being heard. According to Axios today, insiders in the White House are paying attention. Trump reads the polls. He cares about this stuff. When Biden was like, "Oh, the economy's fine. Well, we saw the results. Trump won. It wasn't running against Biden technically, but it's the Biden legacy that Harris was cloaked with, and she still is. And voters know better. Voters are smart. This is what I keep saying over and over and over again. Pay attention to the voters. And I think the White House should pay attention to the voters too. We all should. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.